Hey everyone, welcome back to Name Neighbours. Today I have a tutorial for you. I'm going to be teaching you how to make your very own ear bonnet for your real life pony. This ear bonnet design is by another YouTuber that I learned off of, but I did tweak it a little bit and added a few of my own things. So be sure to check out her video, as well as she does explain how to make the ear bonnet in a slightly different technique. But if you want to learn how to make your ear bonnet look like this, then be sure to keep watching and grab out your tools and materials to make a bonnet. If you'd like to make a summer bonnet, I would suggest using 4-ply cotton yarn, as this is lighter and still soft but thinner, so it's not as fluffy and thick and it doesn't make your pony sweat as much. So I suggest using 4-ply cotton yarn. If you would like to make a winter bonnet, I would highly suggest using 8-ply yarn. This one is synthetic, but you can use cotton as it would probably be more breathable. If you're doing 4-ply cotton yarn, I would suggest using a 2.5mm crochet hook. If you are using the 8-ply yarn, I would suggest using a 3.5 or 4mm crochet hook. I'm going to be using a 4mm crochet hook, but today I'm going to be making the 4-ply one, the 2.5mm hook. So yeah, without further ado, let's get straight into it. I'm going to start by apologizing for the background noise, as we are having renovations, so we do have some builders above me, and that is why you're going to hear some banging around in the background. I'll try to cut it out as best as possible, but if there is some, please excuse that. Let's start out with the measurements. If you would like to make an ear bonnet for a horse, I would not use these measurements, as they are going to be way too small. The measurements for the pony ear bonnet that I'm going to be making are pretty much a one-size-fits-all, but if you have a cob or a slightly smaller pony, you can take measurements of your own. Don't mind me using a Breyer horse, I don't have a horse with me right now, but for measurements you are going to measure from the base of one ear to the base of another ear, and that is your pole measurement. And you're going to measure your ear height from the base to the top of the ear. Then you're going to measure the space in between the ears. I would suggest measuring the width of the ear, as this can be helpful. And last, I'd probably measure from in between the ears to how long you want your bonnet to be, as this can be a helpful guide, so that you know how many rows and stitches you want to do. To use your measurements, you're going to want to take your pole measurement and your in between the ears measurement, and you're going to minus the in between ears measurement from the pole measurement, and then the answer from that equation you're going to divide by 2, and that should be your ear width. And you need to make sure that the ear width matches the ear width that you measured on your pony, as this will help you make sure that you're getting the measurements correct. Then you can kind of write out a little diagram, and then you can get started making your bonnet. If you want to use the measurements that I'm going to be using for the ear bonnet, my pole measurement is 10 inches, the in-between ears is 5 inches, the ear height is 5.2 inches, the ear width is 2.5 inches, and the total bonnet length that I want it to be is going to be 8 inches. Now we're actually going to start making the ear bonnet, now that we've got our measurements and you know what yarn and crochet hook you are using. You're going to take the end of your yarn, and what you're going to do, so you're going to cross the string over like that to make a little loop. You're going to put your fingers through the loop, and you're going to grab this string on the other side and pull it through. Let's do that again. Put the string over the top, fingers through, grab the string, pull it through. As you can see the little loop, you're going to put your hook through that loop and then tighten it by pulling on both of the strings. Now you're going to keep the string connected to your yarn on the right side, and you're going to keep the loose end on the left side. Your hook should be facing to the left, not to the right. You would only reverse this if you are left-handed, but since I am right-handed, I'm going to be using it like this. To start our first stitch and our first row, we're going to do 50 chain stitches, and a chain stitch looks like this. Wrap around just once, and then using the hook, you're going to hook onto that wrapped around thread and go underneath the first stitch and pull it through like that. And it should look like a little V. Now this is counted as one stitch. Now we're going to do our second stitch by doing the same thing. Wrapping around, making sure that the wrapped around string is going to be underneath that hook and pulling it underneath the string. And just keep going, wrapping around, pulling it through. You don't want to make your stitches too tight, otherwise it can be really hard. So try not to make it super tight, just make sure that it's nice and loose, wrapping around, not too much tension, pulling it through. So now I've done 4 stitches and now I'm going to do the other 46. So now I've done my 50 chain stitches and this is what it should look like. It doesn't have to look pretty, but it just needs to not be too tight and it should be pretty decently long. Now that you've got your 50 stitches, you're actually going to do one more chain stitch. Just do wrap around, pull it through. And now what you're going to do is a treble stitch all the way across. First, we're going to wrap around, and because we have just started a new row and we did that extra stitch, we're actually going to not go into that stitch. We're going to skip that stitch, and you see how it's like a little V? You're going to go into the top part of that V. You're going to go into the second one, not the first one, but you only go into the second one the first time. You don't do the second one the full time because that just makes your stitches a whole lot shorter. And see, now it looks like I've got 3 loops. You're going to loop around again, so now it should look like 4, and you're gonna pull it through the V, so now you should have 3 stitches connected, and then you're gonna wrap around, and then you're gonna go underneath all 3 of them, and it should look like that. Go again, wrap around, but this time we're gonna go into the first V we see. This here is actually not a V, that is what we have gone into, so it would be the next one. Go underneath, wrap around again, go underneath the V, and we're gonna wrap around again and pull through all three of them, just like that. See this bit here, this string, that is what you've just gone into. That is not a V. You're going to go into the next one. You need to go into the first V, but not this string. It's really confusing. But you don't want to be, because we went into the second stitch beforehand, when we first started because of that extra chain stitch, it can be confusing. I got confused and thought it was always the second stitch, but it's not. It's always the first V, not the second V, but not this either. Otherwise, you'll just make your row like twice as long. So now we'll go again, wrap around, put it through that first V, wrap around again, pull underneath the V, wrap around again, and pull the wrapped around thread through all 3. And you're just going to do that all the way till the end. So now you've just gone almost all the way across with your treble stitches. You've got a few left. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to do the last few with you. Wrap around. Don't put it through the first string you see, just the first V. Wrap around again. Pull it through that top V. Wrap around. Pull through all 3. Wrap around. Through the V. Wrap around. Wrap around, then through. You wrap around through all 3. Wrap around. Through. Wrap around through that first V. Wrap around through all 3. The last one, wrap around through the V. Wrap around. Pull underneath. Wrap around, go through all 3. And that is the row finished. Now I'm going to show you how to start a new row. So now you've got all the stitches. So what you're going to do is you're actually going to do a chain stitch. Just wrap around, pull through. And now, since we've started a new row, when we go in to do our next treble stitch, wrap around. We're going to skip that first chain stitch. We're going to go into the next V, and then we're going to wrap around, pull through all three. And now you go into the next V. You don't go into the second V. You only ever go into the second V when you're starting a new row. Now you're just going to do treble stitches all the way across, and we are going to do 6 rows in total for the pole, and then we will move on to in between the ears. Just a reminder of how to start a new row. Once you have finished, after you've done all your stitches, you're going to flip over. I didn't mention that part in the when I first showed you how to do a new row. You're going to flip over your work. So if you're facing that way, stitching from left to right, from right to left, sorry, you are going to then flip it over, and then you're going to do 1 chain stitch, and then you're going to go in, wrap around, go for a treble stitch, but skip the chain stitch, go in, wrap around, go through, wrap around, go through, wrap around, go into the next V, wrap around, go through the V, wrap around, through all 3, and then you just keep going until you have 6 rows. Once you've got your 6 rows, it should look something like this. Now I'm going to show you how we're going to tie it off. So once you've finished doing all your treble stitches all the way to the end, we're not going to do a chain stitch because we're not starting a new row. So we're just going to actually pull this loop pretty big and take our hook out. Chuck that to the side for a moment. Pull it pretty big. Grab some scissors. I'm going to cut off a tail. And what we're going to do, so we're going to loop, we're going to put the end of the tail through the hole and just hold the end and hold the loop so that it doesn't go through. And then we're going to pull that bottom part to tighten the first loop. You pull it through again, pull it through, make it tight, pull it through a few times, and just tighten that loop. And then, so you think you've done enough times, you're going to pull the tail through the loop, then pull until it's tight. That is your pole. Now we are going to start on the in between the ears. Now for the ear width, it is about 2.5 inches. So you're going to measure, and it should equal to 13 stitches for a pony. The measurements I'm using, it's going to be 13 stitches in. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our thread. We're going to do the same thing as we did at the start. I put it over the top, fingers through, grab the string, pull it through, put the crochet hook in the loop, pull it till it's tight. It should look like this. Remember to keep the tail on the left hand side and the string connected to the ball of yarn on the right side. Just going to put that to the side for a moment, and we're going to count how many stitches we're going in. You want to go the same amount of stitches in as the other side to keep it even. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That is 13 stitches. 13 stitches or 13 V's. All along here is 13 stitches. We're actually going to go into the 14th stitch, but leaving 13 stitch. You're just going to go straight into that V, and we're going to do a slip stitch. It's the same as a treble stitch, but you're just not wrapping around the first time when you could first go into the V. So you just wrap around, go through that V, and you should have 2. Then you wrap around and you pull through both, just like that. And then you do treble stitches all the way along until you get to the 14th stitch, so that you have 13 stitches left open. So our last stitch would be right here. So then I would probably mark with a spare piece of thread where you are going to be finishing your stitch. I'm going to pull that through, and that will just be a marker. So I've put it onto the 13th stitch so that I know my last stitch will be right there. Let's do treble stitches all the way along. I'm gonna wrap around, go under, wrap around, go into the V, wrap around, pull through all three, wrap around, through the V, wrap around, pull through the V, wrap around, through all three. You should be getting the hang of it by now, but if you aren't, go back and follow the steps of how to do a treble stitch and eventually you'll get the hang of it. In total, we are going to be doing 8 rows, but at the end of the first row, I will remind you how to start a new row. So now that I've reached the end and I've got to this string, I'm going to pull it out because I don't need to do any more stitches. And we're going to start a new row. So we're going to flip over our work. I'm going to do wrap around, pull under for 1 chain stitch, wrap around, skip the chain stitch and go into the next V, wrap around, go under, wrap around, go through all 3, and then we're just going to keep going. And you're going to keep starting new rows, and we're going to do 8 rows for in between the ears. So now that you've done all 8 rows, it should look something like this. Looking pretty good. So now that we have finished those 8 rows, we're going to tie it off. Same thing as last time, just pull the hole pretty big, take the hook out, grab some scissors, cut off a tail, thread it through the hole, then just pull that bottom bit to tighten it, to kind of make a knot. Just pull, thread through. Thread through, pull, thread through, pull, and then thread the end through, and then pull. So now that our bonnet is looking like this, we are going to take the end of our string again, and again, put it over, fingers through, pull the thread, make a knot, the hook through the hole, tighten it, and we're going to choose one side. Gonna go, it's not really a V because all these stitches are just the end of the rows, so we're just gonna go in somewhere. We're gonna wrap around, pull through, just do a slip stitch, wrap around, underneath, and then we're just gonna go along with treble stitches until we get to the end here. Then we're gonna do some chain stitches. Just kind of gonna go in into a piece of thread. Now that we're doing our final treble here, we're gonna do, so we're gonna flip it over and we're gonna do 12 chain stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Now that you've done your 12 chain stitches, you're going to flip it back around and you're going to go into the first V up here, and you're going to do slip stitch, go through, go under, and then you're going to do treble stitches all the way across, do another 12 chain stitches, go into one of the first threads along here, and then do trebles all across, but I'll guide you through that process. So now I've reached the end of this top section here with treble stitches, and now I'm going to flip my work around. I'm going to do 12 chain stitches. I'm going to flip my work around, go into this part and do a slip stitch, And then I'm going to do trebles along the end here. Once you finish that, this is what your work should be looking like. Now we're going to flip it over again, and you're going to do one chain stitch, wrap around getting ready for a treble stitch, skip the chain stitch, go into the first V, and then do trebles all the way around until you reach the next corner. We're going to do 4 rows, and then we're going to move on to the next step. Here I've stopped halfway through to show you what it should be looking like. After your first row going all the way to the other side, it should look something like this. Then of course you flip your work around, do a chain stitch, skip the chain stitch and go into the first V, do a treble, and then proceed to do trebles all the way again until you have 4 rows. Once you've done all 4 rows, it should look something like this. So now we're going to tie it off, doing the same as before, making the hole super big, hook out, cutting a tail, threading that tail through the hole, and just pulling so that you kind of make some knots. And then pulling that tail through to knot it like that. I'm going to snip it. And this is what your bonnet should look like so far. So now we're going to move on to the front bit of the bonnet. So going on the side with the 4 stitches, we are going to take some measuring tape and measure 1.5 inches and then count how many stitches that is. For me, it is, hang on, there's 7 stitches for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my yarn, take the end, make the same knot, put it over, fingers through, pull through like that, hook in, and then I'm going to count 7 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'm going to go into the 8th stitch. So we're not going to do a full treble stitch. What we're going to do is a decrease stitch so that it slowly decreases to make a triangle, and then we'll round it off, or you can square it off at the end. So here we've inserted it into the 8th stitch. So we're going to wrap around, go underneath that stitch, wrap around, and because this is a slip stitch but we are still going to do a decrease stitch, we are going to wrap around, and then we're going to actually, instead of pulling through both, we're going to go into another stitch, wrap around, pull under, wrap around, and then pull through all of them. And you would do the same if it were a treble stitch. You would wrap around, go under, wrap around, go underneath the stitch, wrap around, go into another stitch, and then wrap around, pull under, wrap around, go under all of them, which is going to be a lot of stitches, but yes, that is a decrease. Then you're just going to do treble stitches all the way across until you get to the end, and you're going to leave 2 spaces so that you can do a decrease at the end. Now that I've finished my first row of just normal treble stitches, I've come to the last 2 stitches. So now I'm going to decrease stitch again at the end. You're going to do a decrease stitch at the end of every row at the start and end. So we're going to wrap around, go into that stitch, wrap around, go underneath, wrap around. We're not going to go through all 3. We're actually going to go into another stitch, wrap around, go under, wrap around, and pull through all of these. And there you have it. Then you just flip your work around, do a chain stitch, wrap around, skip that chain stitch and go straight into the treble, wrap around, go underneath. So this is the decrease, so we're going to wrap around and go into another stitch instead of going through the 3. Do a wrap around, go under, wrap around, and then go through all of them. And then you just go along till you get to the end. The last 2 stitches will be your decrease, and then you just keep decreasing until you get to a point where it meets, and then you do decreases to make it rounded. So I've done a few rows now. This is what it should look like so far. You can see how it's kind of triangling inward. So you should be doing a decrease on each end and still doing that chain stitch and then a decrease and then trebles all the way across. Last 2 stitches, decrease, chain stitch, decrease, treble stitches, decrease, and so on until eventually the triangle gets so small that they meet, and then I will, I guess, meet you there when I have crocheted all the way up until that part of the triangle. Okay, so I haven't gone all the way up, but I have done most of the way, as you can see. If your stitches are looking a little tighter than this, don't worry. I'm not sure why it's so loose today. It's very loose stitching. My stitching usually looks a little bit more snug than this, but yeah, today's just being a bit of a weird day. But anyway, I'm just gonna finish off this row and then we're gonna do the last few rows together. As you can see, it's getting quite close to meeting. So just do, so just gonna do one more normal treble. And the last 2 stitches will be a decrease. So go into that one, wrap around, go under, and then wrap around, go through all those loops, and then turn around. This is what my work is looking like. So now my work is kind of meeting. It's getting to the point where they're getting quite close together. So here I'd actually do 2 decreases on one end because it can end up looking very triangular. Unless if you do want to have that really triangular effect, then this is what you're going for and you just want to keep doing singular decreases. But I find that it can thin out quite a bit at the end and it doesn't exactly look the best in my opinion. So I like to round off mine quite a bit. If you don't want to round yours off, you would do a few more to square it off and then you just tie it off looking square like this, and then we'd move on to the next step and you'd skip the rounded off step. But since I am going to be doing rounded off in this, I'm going to do that chain stitch, and now we're going to do 2 decreases on each end. We're going to go in, round, do that first bit of the treble, then we're going to wrap around and go into the next stitch, wrap around, go under, and then go through all of them. We're going to do another decrease. And then you're going to do trebles until you get to the last 4 stitches, and then you're going to turn those last 4 stitches into 2 decrease stitches. So here I've reached my last 4 stitches, so I'm going to finish off the row with you. Go in to the first part of the treble, wrap around in for that. That decrease. I'm going to do our second decrease to finish off the row. And then brown, do the same thing. As you can see, it does curve in a lot more. I reckon I'm going to do 2 or 3 more rows and then I'll be finished with the front of the bonnet. So here I'm on my last row, and because there were so few stitches, I've made every single one of my stitches a decrease, and then that makes it a really nice rounded shape for the end. So just going to do this last decrease stitch. Go in, round, under, and through all of them. And here I've finished the front of my bonnet with a nice rounded shape. It doesn't look rounded because I haven't tied it off, but that is the front of my bonnet done. And that is the base of the bonnet done, and then we'll go to outlining it. So now you're just going to tie it off. And here we have the finished base of the bonnet. And as you can see around here, it's made a nice rounded shape, which is very nice, very good. I think this might be a little more than 8 inches long, but that's alright. It doesn't really matter as long as you're okay with it being a little bit shorter or a little bit longer. So we're just going to cut off the last of the loose ends. So now we're going to outline the bonnet. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our main colour thread. I'm going to make the same knot. Taking this, putting it over, fingers through, pull the thread through. Hook through the hole, pull it tight, and then you're not going to wrap around. We're just going to go in and do that slip stitch. I would say going into one of your corners so that when you, because we're going to be going all the way around. So just going to go into the first, like it doesn't necessarily have to be like a definite V stitch, but just a thread, a loose, like a loop that you can see. Go into it, wrap around underneath, wrap around, go through both of them, and then we're just going to do, actually we're not going to do treble stitches, we're going to do slip stitches all the way around until you get back to where you started. So just a reminder of what a slip stitch is. It's the same as a treble stitch, but we don't wrap around at the start. We just go straight in, wrap around, underneath, wrap around, pull through. Go straight in, wrap around, pull through, wrap around, pull through. And then you just go straight in, wrap around, pull through, wrap around, pull through. And then you just do that all the way around. So I've finished going all the way around with my slip stitches. It may seem like that your bonnet is kind of, you know, tight and it's tucking in a bit, but that's okay because it will loosen when we do the next couple of layers. So we've done slip stitches with the main colour all the way around, and I've got back to my place. I'm just going to tie it off and then snip both of these ends. If you forgot how to tie off, just wind back the video a bit to remind yourself how to tie it off, as I've done it many times in the video. And then you're going to take another colour such as white, black, or a different colour that you want. I personally love white for most colours, but you can use black as well. So now I'm going to take my white thread and I'm going to take the end. I'm going to make a knot, put my hook in it. If you have a white or black thread that is slightly thicker than your normal thread, that's fine. You can use a thicker thread, just make sure you're using the same size hook. We're actually just going to do an entire other round of slip stitches, but with white instead. So I'm going to go into the other corner because I find that if you do start in one corner too many times, it can bunch up and make a little lumpy looking thing. So we're just going to go in and continue our slip stitches all the way around with our white. Going in, remembering don't wrap around before you go in, you just go straight in. So you just go in, round, under, around, under, until you get all the way back to the start. So now I've finished going all the way around with my white slip stitches, and it looks like this, looking pretty good. So now we're going to tie this off. So this is what it should be looking like, obviously unless you're doing different colors. Now we're going to go back to our original colour. For me, it was yellow. So we've got our original colour. And what we're going to do is going to make a knot. Hook through. We are going to wrap around because we're going to do a layer of treble stitches all the way around. Now, as you can see, you want to look at which side the white V's are on. For me, it is on this side. So I'm actually going to flip it over and be working on this side. And as you can see, where the yellow and white stitches meet, you're actually going to be going into the yellow. You're not going to be going into the white. You want to be going into the yellow. So I'm going to go back into a different corner. So you can just do a slip stitch to start out with and then go all around with trebles. That's what I'm going to be doing. So I'm just going to go around, go into that yellow. Just do treble stitches all the way around. You're going to be working into your main colour, not your white. So we're just going to do treble stitches all the way around until we get back to this spot. So I've officially finished going all the way around with my treble stitches, and this is what it looks like. Already tied it off. So this is what it looks like. I'm definitely very happy with it. So now we're going to move on to sewing on the ears and the front piece. You don't have to do the front piece, but this does make it look pretty, and it does spread the front piece out a bit so it's not folding in, because your stitches might be tight and they might be enforcing the front of the bonnet to curve in a bit. So the front piece will just help flatten it out. But if you don't want to do the front piece, or you don't have enough fabric, that's fine. You don't have to. It'll work either way, but I'm going to show you how to make the ears and sew them on. So you're going to take the fabric that you're going to be using. I'm just using regular cotton fabric. And just going to unfold it and find, oh wow, it's actually a big piece. And then you're just going to fold that in half like so. So that's the folded side. This is the cut side. So I've actually made an ear template for myself so that I can follow this. So basically I just put this up like that. And I draw following this line and then allowing for seam along here. But since you probably don't have an ear template, I'm going to be showing you how to do that from scratch. So you're going to take your measurements, and for your ear height, you're going to measure along. Mine's 5.5 high and 3.5 in width. So you're just going to take your measurements. You can use a fabric marker. I don't have a fabric marker, so I'm just going to use a regular pen. And you're just going to mark from one end to me, it's 5.5. So that's where I'm marking. And then you're going to take measurements. So me, I'm measuring 3.5. So I'm going to go here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to draw a curved line to meet up here. So I'm going to go all the way to meet to that height line. And that is your ear. I'm just going to draw along here. There we go, and that is what you are going to be cutting from. Then you're going to do that again for one more ear, so you have 2 ears, and then I will show you what to do from there. So you're just going to cut this out, and then I will show you what to do. So this is what your ear should look like. It should be looking like this after you've cut it out, and you should be able to open it and it should look like kind of like a semicircle. So you just want to keep that folded. Now, if you're using a pattern material that has a dark side where it should be showing up and then a faded side, you want to make sure your faded side is facing out, because we're going to be flipping the ears inside out, and you don't want the faded side on the outside. You want the proper side on the outside. So make sure your faded side is facing upwards. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make sure that the edges are lined up. You can use a pin if you want to keep it in place. And you probably do need a sewing machine. I do recommend using a sewing machine. You can hand sew it. You're just gonna, if you're hand sewing, you just want to hand sew all the way along. But I'm going to be machine sewing. I have it on a classic stitch setting, just like kind of looks like a back stitch. So we're just gonna lower the foot and then just sew it until we get all the way to the end. So just gonna go back a few times, back and forth like a knot, so all the way to the other side, making sure that your edges stay lined up. And your ear should be looking like this. If you're using a darker colour, I would suggest using black thread or a colour similar to the fabric you're using. Since I'm using yellow, I'm going to be using white so that kind of blends in case any seam is showing. So then what we're going to do is we're going to go in. We're actually going to take inside and we're going to flip it inside out. So the seam should be now on the inside. And if you can't really get that last bit of the corner, you just take some scissors or another, like you can take your crochet hook or something, and you can just go in there and just push it up that last bit. There we go. That is how you make an ear. And then you're just going to repeat the step with the second ear, so you have 2 sewn ears. So I'm just going to do that real quick. And then we have 2 ears ready for sewing onto the bonnet. So now you're going to take your bonnet, as you can see front here, and kind of fold it inside out, and you're going to get one of the ear holes. You're going to take one of your ears and you're going to stick it through that hole. Here you're going to make sure, you're going to kind of find where this knot is. That's the seam, so it kind of lines with the corner. You can find the seam of the ear and you kind of line that up. Now this is where it gets confusing, because I have noticed while creating ear bonnets that the hole is a little too big, but that's okay.
So we will sew up the extra bit later. Basically, currently your seam is aligned, as you can see. But as you sew and you pull over this extra bit, so naturally the seam will move and then it will no longer be aligned with your seam along here. It will no longer be aligned with your corner. So what you're going to do is you're going to, because my sewing machine moves, everything will be moving that way, meaning that this will be moving this way. So we're going to put it in, align the seam at first. Then what we're going to do is we're going to move the seam slightly in the opposite direction that I'm going to be sewing. So eventually, when my seam moves, it will move to line up with the seam. That was really confusing, and if you don't have this problem with your machine, you don't need to bother. Just line it up, use pins if you need to. I don't personally use pins. But yeah, we're just going to put this under the sewing machine. Just going to put the foot down, and then we're going to sew until we get to a place where we can't really sew until, I'll show you actually. So for now, we're going to have the setting on the biggest back stitch, because if we don't like our stitching and it's not aligned, we can easily unpick it, because if we have it on this setting where the back stitches are super small, it'll be really hard to unpick. So we keep it on the biggest setting first, and then we'll move on to this zigzag stitch if we think that our aligning of the seam and corner is good. So I'm going to sew this. I'm just going to slowly start. So you just kind of round. I probably need to unpick my seam because it is not matching up with the corner, but that is okay. So now we've gotten to a place where there's all this extra space. Wow, that's actually a lot, actually. Probably because my stitches are super big and there is no more ear. So what I'm going to do is actually just going to make sure the needle's up, lift that foot, snip, then we're going to fold it back out and see what the seam looks like. Yeah, nah. Because we're going to be having the bonnet like this, you can see how this seam is meant to be over here, but it's not, it's moved. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to have to unpick along here, and then we're going to restart, but we're going to move the seam even further so that when it goes, it meets here. So let's do that. I'm going to unpick that real quick, and then I'll be back. So now I've unpicked my stitches, so I'm just going to go back in and do the same thing as I did before. Put the foot down. And then we're going to sew again and see if it works this time. So now we've gotten to a point where there's no more to sew. Just going to lift that foot, cut off the excess. As you can see now, it's much better aligned, and it's this seam here, the folded bit, matches with the top of the bonnet, which is very nice. So now, as you can see, this big gaping hole here, what we're going to do is we are going to hand sew this together. So we're going to take your needle, you can use any size needle, but I'm using a bit of a bigger one, and I'm going to take some yellow cotton thread. Just going to wind, you don't need much. Just gonna, how I like to do it is I like to fold it in half. I like to lick the end, it's really weird, but it's what we crafty sewers do. I'm just going to put that through the eye. Just going to hold that, clutch the end with your pinky so that don't lose it. What we're going to do is we're going to start at the end here. I'm going to go in to the top of the stitchings. I'm going to pull, and then you see this little loop here. I don't know if you can, but if you can, you're going to put your needle through that loop and pull, and it becomes a knot. And then you're just going to do around and around stitches. Just going to loop around in the same spot to create kind of like a knot. Just gonna do one more. I'm gonna go in and out. Just go around and around, make a knot. And then you shouldn't have a gaping hole anymore. It should be all nice and sewn up. Now we're going to turn our machine settings to the smallest zigzag, which is right next to my biggest one, which is helpful. And then you're going to fold your bonnet inside out again, and you're going to go back in over that seam to start out with so that you solidify where it is going to be. You're just going to go in with that zigzag stitch, and then after you do your zigzag stitch, you're just going to go back and forth so it's a knot. You're going to cut off the end loose ends, see if it looks good when you fold it back to its normal side, and then you're going to do the exact same thing for the other ear. So rewind the video if you need to be reminded step by step of how to do it. Make sure that when you are doing the other ear, you move the seam in the opposite direction that you're going to be kind of sewing. So because mine is moving that way, I'm going to move my seam that way. If you're sewing that way, move your seam that way. That was really confusing, but yeah, so you just do the zigzag seam, and then you sew on the other ear the exact same way you did the first ear. Your seam should be looking pretty on point, and it should be flat when you put your fingers flat through it. It shouldn't be seam over here. It should be just perfectly like this, which is very nice. And then you're just going to do the same thing with the other ear, and I'll come back to you when I've done the other ear.
So I've sewed on the other ear. The seam wasn't as good on this one, so I ironed it down so it sits flat. So that even though the seam isn't aligned with the corner, it still sits flat. So now we're going to move on to doing this front bit here. As you can see, it kind of curves inward a bit, so we're going to fix that by adding a front piece, and also make it look nicer. But if you don't want to do a front piece and you're not having this folding in problem, then your ear bonnet is done. But if you want to do the front piece, continue watching. You're going to take your fabric, you're going to unfold it. I again have a template for making the front piece, but since you probably won't have a template, I'm going to be showing you how to do it from scratch. Just going to put your bonnet onto the fabric, kind of think how high you want the front piece to go up. For me, I'm thinking about here, so across there. So we're going to mark where we want it to be. Make sure it looks pretty even, and then you're just going to outline around the front of the bonnet. Then it should look like that when you remove it. And then you're just going to draw a nice big semicircle all the way to the other side. Make sure that it looks pretty even. Then you're just going to cut that out, and I'll show you what to do from there.
So now you're going to take your front piece, and if you're using pattern material that has a normal side and a faded side, you're going to make the faded side up. What we're going to do is we're going to start at one edge. I'm just going to fold it over slightly, make it a decent amount, maybe a centimeter or more. And then you're just going to take some pins, and you're just going to pin that down, because we'll be sewing along here, and it just helps to make a seam to stop from fraying. And you're just going to go all the way around, kind of make the fold a little bit smaller at the end, because you don't want it to be too squared if you do it fully like that. So you just want to do a little bit, grab a pin that down, really just get in, make sure every spot pinned down. Then we're going to get ready to sew. I would suggest having your sewing machine on the middle back stitch. You don't want the smallest one, but you don't want the biggest one. You want the one in between, as this just helps that it to be a nice tight stitch, but you can unpick it if you want to. So I'm just going to put this under. Try to keep your stitches closer to the cut edge and not the folded edge, because the folded edge is where we're going to be sewing it onto the bonnet. Take that pin out. Take that out. Snip off those loose ends, and it should look like that. Now we're going to take our front piece, flip it over so that the seam side is showing up, and we're going to use this top end and fold it over the same way we did before. And then you're going to go back under the sewing machine and sew along here. And it should look like something like this. If you do find that it is a bit weird and it's like sticking up a bit, you can iron it and that will make it a bit smoother and then easier to put onto your bonnet. But I'm not going to iron it because I'm just going to be showing it straight onto the bonnet. So let's get onto that. This bit should be super easy. All you're going to do is just going to take your bonnet, going to lay it out flat. You're going to take your front piece, you're going to align it with the bottom of the bonnet. If the sides like this, if it's looking a bit like that and it's not matching up, kind of just tuck it in a little bit and then get your pins and just pin it to the bonnet. We're going to put this under the sewing machine. I'm going to sew along right along the edge. There we go. And you're just going to take your scissors, snip off the loose ends. And that is your bonnet fully complete. This is what your ear bonnet should be looking like, hopefully. My job wasn't the best. I'm sure you guys probably looked a little bit better than mine. But this is what your ear bonnet should be looking like. I'm actually kind of happy with it. I will be selling this to one of my friends for her pony, and I think it's only worth about $10, but that's okay. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and even consider subscribing, as I do have a couple other tutorials on things like how to make a Schleich halter, how to make a lead rope, and random things like that. And I also have just fun random videos for you guys to enjoy. So if you aren't subscribed already, please do, and that would be really helpful, and it does mean a lot. Anyway, that is going to be all for today's YouTube video. I hope this was helpful and that you were able to create an ear bonnet and that my instructions were clear and that nothing was super confusing. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will be seeing you in my next YouTube video. See you guys next time. Bye!